Welcome, everyone, to Talia Tuesday on the Blueprint Podcast, where we dive deep into the realms of confidence and assertiveness with our co-host, Talia Bombola. As a licensed marriage and family therapist and specialist in confidence and assertiveness, Talia brings a wealth of expertise and insights to our discussions. Join us each Tuesday as we explore practical strategies, personal anecdotes, and empowering advice to help you cultivate the confidence and assertiveness you need to thrive in all aspects of life. Get ready to unlock your full potential and build the life you desire with Talia and Jason as your guides. Have you seen Paternity Court?
No, I've seen
the clips.
Yeah,
it's so good.
You don't want to end up on that.
Nobody wants to end up. Nobody wakes up one day and go, oh my God, I can't. I just hope to be on Paternity Court one day.
You are the father. Why did you even call us here?
There was one time where the guy's shaking because he wanted it so badly to be his. And neither kid was his. It's crazy. So, Talia, this pops up a lot where people are always asking more about disorganized attachment style.
Yes.
And the difference of the avoidant trying to get attention and affection, or if that even happens, and also the similarities of disorganized and avoidant with a push-pull dynamic. Is there any similarity there?
So I'll answer the first question first. And this is based on my training in psychoanalysis. So not everybody may have the same definition of disorganized attachment. I want to give that as a caveat. Disorganized attachment comes from, and we see this, if anybody are familiar, obviously if they're listening to this, they're familiar with the attachment styles, the strange situation experiment with Mary Ainsworth and John Bowlby's research, who's like the father of all things attachment. The highest prevalence of disorganized attachment was like over 13%, was in the disorganized attachment, which is when the children, when they were interacting with their primary caregivers, experienced alarm more often than not. So it was a feeling of being off-put, a feeling of being like surprised or startled. Whereas with anxious attachment and avoidant attachment, it's you're sometimes there for me or sometimes not. It doesn't necessarily mean when they're there for you, it's in an alarming way. And the way that I explain disorganized attachment, again, other people may differ in this or have because of their own experience labeling themselves as disorganized, be like, well, I don't adhere to that, so I don't think mine is coming from that. You're more than welcome to think wherever yours comes from is from wherever yours comes from. The very people who are supposed to keep you safe and cared for and nurtured are the ones who are causing the abuse, the neglect, and the alarm. So that's where, in my view, and an analytic view, that's where the disorganized attachment comes from. That your brain and your psyche when you're an infant, which infancy and analysis lasts up to 3 years mentally for children, can't possibly process what is going on, and that the people who are supposed to love you are the ones hurting you. So we look at disorganized attachment as a defense, as a psychological defense that mediates childhood trauma and dissociation. So when you're trying to survive basically your childhood with caregivers who are abusing you and they're supposed to be loving you, this is also the case that is made for people who have, we used to be called multiple personality disorder, but dissociative identity disorder, that sometimes the dissociative tendencies and defenses were so strong and they occurred from such a young age, before age 5, when the personality really settles in, that the personality settles into multiple different personalities. And I'm not saying everybody who has disorganized attachment has DID. I want to be very clear about that. I'm trying to highlight that sometimes the defense is so strong it ends up manifesting into or turning into a disorder that is far longer lasting than simply the disorganized attachment style. And when it comes to relationships, there is somewhat of a push-pull dynamic when it comes to being attached, but it's unique and different from the single scoop avoidant, like just the avoidant attachment style. They typically didn't have the same models as the disorganized attachment, so they have some reference points usually of, oh, it could go well. But with disorganized attachment, especially if you look at when kids grow up in highly traumatized, chaotic households, they're probably not going on play dates where they see other kids' parents functioning normally. Maybe they're outcast at school, so they don't have other templates for other parent styles or romantic styles. Generally, the whole family system is colluding and participating in some way. So when you look up the family system, like upwards the family tree, like grandparents or aunts or uncles might also have a lot of dysfunction. It's unique. The push-pull for the disorganized attachment system is unique from the avoidant because there's probably not a template for what actual love could be like or is. Whereas with the avoidant, there's other references. They're not as outcast in society, and they usually have a better chance of having at least one or two successful, meaning like not completely failed. And I'm not saying failed like it's a failure, but like unsuccessful. It wasn't a long-term relationship the way that they wanted it to be. With disorganized, because our romantic, with every attachment style, because our romantic relationships and intimate relationships are the closest to our primary caregiver relationships, the threat and the alarm that comes through the adult's system when they have disorganized attachment, when they're getting close to true intimacy, they will sabotage it in ways that are far more traumatized than an avoidant would. An avoidant is more likely to pull away, to not really do as much, to acquiesce. They're more passive in the destruction, quote unquote, of the relationship. Whereas the disorganized attached person wants so desperately to escape the pain of childhood. They really want to lean in and when they're close, but when they feel like they're going to be abandoned or hurt or mistreated the way they were in childhood, the reaction to it is similar to the reaction they either wanted to have when their caregiver was abusing or neglecting them but couldn't because it wasn't safe, or it's the reaction they did have which inadvertently got them more punished. So this again is more like a more pained, like in-depth version view of disorganized attachment, but that's coming from an analytic view more than it is like a CBT or another like behavioral based view where it's if you just don't do these behaviors. With disorganized attachment, it goes to the core. Most attachment styles do, but it has, from what I've seen, there's usually more luck with mitigating the reactive symptoms and managing it than there is like a shift away from that and into an earned secure attachment. 3 of the insecure attachment styles, disorganized into secure, then maybe avoidant, and then anxious, because anxious, when you have enough reassurance, you're not anxious anymore. With avoidance, it's like you need enough space, and that can sometimes be tough to find somebody who can give you enough space in the secure functioning relationship. But with disorganized, because it's both the anxious and the avoidant, I need reassurance, but I need space. It can be exhausting. I've worked with at least 2 couples that I can think of over my time as a therapist that they didn't end up together because it was so beyond what we could have worked on in therapy. Like we managed it, but it was so beyond, not repair. It was so beyond what both of them could have, they would have to sacrifice so much for it to become secure functioning. They just decided it was better to part ways. Like it was just too much to deal with.
They're each individual capacity.
Yeah.
1 for each other and
Yes.
2 to then do the work at the same time. So
it was a lot because some of them have family systems that they're trying to blend. Some of them have family systems that they're considering becoming like should we get married and have kids, or we're not together with our primary partners anymore, but now we're together with each other and we have a blended family. There's so many other factors on top of that can make the healing difficult. It's not that there's no blueprint to it, but do you really want to undertake the blueprint, I think, is the question sometimes with disorganized attachment. It's chaotic for the individual who has it, and it's especially chaotic for the individual who's partnered with the person who has it, namely when neither of you are in therapy aware of what the pattern is.
Yeah, and that's not even taking into consideration the maladaptive coping mechanisms that often goes along with it. So the use of substances and other things.
Yeah. Yeah. And so when the person had asked what are the similarities with avoidant attachment, it's more so you didn't know which version you were going to get. So you developed like a hyper independence because of it. But with disorganized attachment, it was more like contradictory. So the child would try to reach out for the parent's attention, and it was given with alarm, or it was like the turning against in couples therapy, how you can turn towards a bid for connection, you can turn away from it, or you can which is an accident. Ooh, I missed your bid. And then turning against it is like, no, I heard you. Like I'm intentionally not doing it. It's more so that category with disorganized attachment. And there's no strategy for the disorganizedly attached, that's a word now, to person to have the coping skills or either to seek stress relief or to seek comfort. It can feel very chaotic. And in childhood, there was a lot of fear that went managed and unaddressed from the caregiver to the child. And they also showed fear and alarm, again, being around their primary caregiver, when in the other attachment experiments, it's not that the child was as alarmed as much as they were either indifferent or clinging. So there's different presentations of it. And again, you're getting a view of this is more research backed than it is, this is how it's going to look like as an adult. I can tell you what it might feel like as an adult in your relationship based on what your childhood felt like. That's more my shtick. If you've obviously heard these episodes before, I always say everything goes back to childhood.
It does. Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Or fortunately.
Fortunately, when you can treat it. Unfortunately, when there feels sometimes there's no way through it.
Yeah. But at least it gives you some sort of framework to start with. And I think that's where a lot of people can find just a little bit of relief in knowing that maybe these things aren't so far out of reach as you might initially think, in that finding the right therapist or whoever you go to can definitely help you go down that path. Thank you all for tuning into today's episode of Talia Tuesday on the Blueprint Podcast with Talia Bombola. Remember, building confidence, self-love, and assertiveness is a journey, and each step you take brings you closer to your goals. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast for more insightful conversations and practical tips to support your personal growth, and head over to my Stand store to sign up for the 21-day self-love challenge, on sale now, and you can also drop a question for Talia and I for the podcast. Until next time, keep embracing your strengths, asserting your boundaries, and living authentically. Take care, and we'll see you next Tuesday on the Blueprint Podcast.